Guys, one way that, certain politicians kind of win me over, regardless of whether or not I agree with all their policies, is for them to be principled in their stance on liberty and freedom. Okay? When things happen, right? So, for example, like 9/11, the establishment and the government uses this as an excuse to infringe on our rights and freedoms. Okay? That's how we ended up with the Patriot Act, right? Something that initially was designed to try to counter terrorism and to prevent another 9/11, but was so broadly interpreted by the establishment that essentially it ended up with a program that essentially spied on basically every American, right? The government is essentially illegally searching us and trying to justify that by saying that, well, they're trying to prevent terrorism. And we don't even know if what they're doing is actually working. But what we do know is that they have expansive surveillance capabilities that I believe are unconstitutional. And this is something that libertarians agree with, a lot of progressives agree with, people on the right agree with. But you know who doesn't agree with it? The establishment. Why? Because the establishment understands that if the government can keep their eyes on the populace, right, and they can control the information that the populace receives, that's how they stay in power. Liberty and freedom is a threat to the establishment. Being able to think the way you want to think and believe what you want to believe is a threat to them. So every single time there's an act of domestic terrorism, right, the government is going to use that as a way to justify expanding their powers. And this is an important conversation that people on the right and the left need to be having, because it looks like they're going to use the Capitol event in order to try to do that. But before we get in that, my name is Greg Foreman and you're watching A Black Conservative Perspective. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share. A Black Conservative Perspective, aka a leftist worst nightmare. You can also follow me on Twitter at GForemanBCP. Let's get it. All right, guys, so I'm about to show you guys a clip of Tulsi Gabbard on Fox News. And guys, Tulsi Gabbard, really, I have a soft spot for her because, again, I don't necessarily agree with all her policies, but I know that she's principled in how she feels about, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, our basic rights and liberties. Okay, so I have to respect her for that, and I also have to respect her more because some progressives tend to also be against mass government surveillance and things like the Patriot Act, but they try to frame the government abusing its power in terms of them doing it with black and brown people, and they always try to use race, right? They try to use race in their argument as a way to justify, their position. However, I mean, what I understand is that the pendulum swings both ways, okay? When the government has expanded powers, they're not just going to use them against black and brown people or, people of color or whatever, right? They're going to use it against everybody. Everybody that doesn't agree with the establishment narrative is going to be subject to this type of surveillance and government overreach. So Tulsi Gabbard, in my opinion, does a great job, right, going on Fox News and really talking about how the pendulum swings the other way and how establishment types like John Brennan and Adam Schiff are trying to use this Capitol event in order to justify going after people who they define as domestic terrorists, particularly those on the right and those who have been supporters of President Trump. Let's take a listen.
Former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard from Hawaii, Democrat, joins us now. Congresswoman, great to see you. I know you've just been out of the job for a week or two. Are you surprised they're pushing forward with this extra surveillance on would-be domestic terror?
It's so dangerous. As you guys have been talking about, this is an issue that all Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Libertarians should be extremely concerned about, especially because we don't have to guess about where this goes or how this ends. When you have people like former CIA Director John Brennan openly talking about how he's spoken with or heard from appointees and nominees in the Biden administration who are already starting to look across our country for these types of movements similar to the insurgencies they've seen overseas, that in his words, he says, make up this unholy alliance of religious extremists, racists, bigots. He lists a few others and adds at the end, even libertarians. So when you look at their process and they start looking at, okay, what characteristics are we looking for as we're building this profile of a potential extremist? What are we talking about? A religious extremist? Are we talking about Christians, evangelical Christians? What is a religious extremist? Is it somebody who's pro-life? I mean, where do you take this? You start looking at, okay, well, obviously you have to be a white person, obviously likely male, libertarians, well, if anybody who loves freedom, liberty, maybe has an American flag outside their house, or people who, attended a Trump rally. Once you start walking this down the path, you see where it leads to a very dangerous undermining of our civil liberties, our freedoms in our Constitution, and a targeting of almost half of the country.
Ilhan Omar says this. We already have laws in the books, sorry, but you are just going to have to learn to apply them. The other thing I thought was interesting, Congresswoman, I don't see any FBI demanding more tools. They feel they got the tools. These are congressional leaders or members who feel as though they're so freaked out by Trump supporters, they still can't understand why anyone would support him. They want to get to the bottom of it. And do you think the whole deprogramming of Trump supporters, this new buzzword among detractors and Democrats, has anything to do with this?
Yeah, I think it does very directly. I think just on the FBI front, I read a great op-ed this morning from a former FBI agent who made a very strong case for why this new domestic terror law introduced by Adam Schiff is wrong and is directly going to undermine our constitutional rights and freedoms. This whole effort, whether you're talking about this bill or people saying that we have to deprogram these Trump cultists and people who voted for Trump because they've been radicalized, all of this just goes to further tear our country apart. And it moves towards the thing Joe Biden said in his inauguration speech that he shouldn't happen, which is a dehumanization of your opponent. And that's where his voice is so necessary right now. He is the president of this country. He delivered this speech, his voice, himself, speaking to the American people. He needs to denounce people like John Brennan and their statements, bills like the one Adam Schiff put forward, and truly speak to the American people about how we must come together around, the Constitution, around our Bill of Rights, around these rights that have been endowed to us by our Creator.
If he had your leadership ability, he would do it. Maybe he still will. That's why she ran for president. Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, thanks so much.
Man, how can you not respect the hell out of Tulsi? Right? Like, I mean, again, even if you disagree with her policies, like her coming out and just giving it straight, right? Just saying, listen, people like Adam Schiff who are basically looking to have a Patriot Act 2.0, and John Brennan, who's, deep state, who's establishment shield, these people are wrong. They're using this event to try to push for more government overreach and oversight that, quite honestly, is unnecessary because the FBI has all the tools they need. Now, what Adam Schiff's bill would do is that it would essentially make anybody who they deem poses a threat, domestic threat, violence or terror or potential vandalism of certain property, could potentially face what they call domestic terrorism crimes, which there's technically no such thing as domestic terrorism crimes right now. And that's something that they want to introduce. Okay. And that would apply, right, to BLM protests, to Antifa protests, and also apply to anybody that's protesting on the right, such as a Trump rally or something like that. It could potentially apply to all those things. Okay. And this is something where I'm not surprised about this because the establishment knows that they may feed into BLM. They may feed into Antifa for right now, particularly the left establishment may do that. However, they know that ultimately these groups are a threat. And this is why people on the left who push for more censorship, who push for more government overreach, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. They do not understand that the pendulum swings the other way. It's just right now, the pendulum is swung towards the right. But it will come back, and it will swing towards the left. Now, I am happy to see that some people, particularly some civil rights groups, are smart enough to see this, okay? And hopefully they can tell the woke left, like, yo, y'all need to chill out on this. Because this is from Reason magazine, which is a great libertarian source that I like to go to, particularly when I'm looking for a more libertarian view that's very factual. So that's why I like, reason.com. So good site. More than 100 civil rights groups agree we don't need new domestic terrorism laws. Civil rights groups across the country are urging President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, as well as congressional Democrats, not to pass new laws to address any potential threats from right nationalists emboldened by and loyal to former President Donald Trump. In a letter dated Tuesday, 135 civil rights organizations ranging from religious groups, immigration advocates, LGBT organizations to the American Civil Liberties Union and the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People expressed their concerns about calls to pass new criminal laws in the wake of the riot and temporary invasion of the U.S. Capitol by Trump supporters. The Department of Justice, including the Federal Bureau of Investigation, has over 50 terrorism-related statutes it can use to investigate and prosecute criminal conduct, including white supremacist violence, as well as dozens of other federal statutes related to hate crimes, organized crimes, and violent crimes. The failure to confront and hold accountable white nationalist violence is not a question of not having appropriate tools to employ, but a failure to use those tools on hand. To date, DOJ has simply decided as a matter of policy and practice not to prioritize white nationalist crimes. I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't agree with that at all. I think that you saw somebody like Dylan Roof. I mean, dude got the death penalty. Like, what are you talking about? You know what I'm saying? And this is why I hate, when it comes from the left, because they always try to use it in the context of race. Okay? Like, just talk about how it impedes on the rights of the American people. Everybody on both sides of the aisle, it infringes on our rights. Okay, if you just keep it that simple, this right here is inherently divisive. Even though it should be all inclusive of everybody, it is inherently divisive to a certain extent. But at the very least, they understand that the pendulum swings both ways. So I got to give them a little bit of credit for that. The letter is necessary because Biden and his administration came into the White House already planning to focus on domestic terrorism, and one possibility the transition team was mulling over is the Confronting Threats of Domestic Terrorism Act, H.R. 4192, which was introduced in 2019 by Representative Adam Schiff. Again, guys, this is essentially the Patriot Act 2.0. The act establishes new offenses whenever somebody commits a violent crime with the intent to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, influence the policy of government by intimidation or coercion, or affect the conduct of a government. The law covers crimes such as kidnapping, murder, and assault with a dangerous weapon, as well as property damage that creates substantial risk of serious bodily harm, injury to any other person. Okay, by definition, isn't Antifa and BLM trying to influence government policy with intimidation and coercion? Is that not what no justice, no peace is? Right? Like, I'm just saying, passing something like this would make groups like BLM and Antifa technically domestic terrorist organizations, right? You could define them as that. Okay, the same way you could better define whatever type of, activities on the right that, they want to deem as, inherently violent or trying to change government policies that happen to support the president. The pendulum swings both ways. Okay? So my thing is that we need more leaders like Tulsi Gabbard, the Rand Pauls of the world, people who really understand this stuff, that really care about our basic rights that are acknowledged by the Constitution. They need to step up. Okay? And guys, honestly, this is probably one of the most important issues of our lifetimes right now. Because a lot of people want to talk about America becoming China, how we're influenced by China. This is how we get there, right? Laws on the books like the Patriot Act 2.0, it just justifies more government overreach. And just like with the Patriot Act, they're going to have a broad interpretation of whatever new laws may be put on the books, and they're going to use it and abuse it in order to go after people they don't like, particularly political opponents, particularly groups they don't like, particularly groups that are making them look bad. Both sides of the aisle are going to be able to use it, right, for those reasons. And because of that, I personally am vehemently against these type of expansions of the surveillance state. Okay? So, again, guys, people like Tulsi Gabbard, I got to give her, her credit. And I hope that, you know, people on the left like AOC, the Rashida Tlaib's, the Ilhan Omar's, who say they're against this, well, if you're against it, you need to stop using rhetoric to try to make Trump supporters out to be domestic terrorists. Okay? You need to stop using rhetoric that is inherently divisive, that is going to make people on your side that more government overreach is justified. Because essentially you're telling people that people on the right are dangerous people. And that's why, you know, even though I think people like the Squad, I think they have good intentions. It's just that they're so childish. They don't have enough experience in life and context on history to understand where this type of thing goes. Because they're just so caught up in the moment of trying to be super woke, right? And they're so caught up in their race narrative, they don't understand the pendulum always swings the other way. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.